The day we moved into the old Victorian on Willow Lane felt like the start of a dream, the kind of fresh beginning you see in movies, with golden hour light filtering through the ancient oaks and the promise of new memories in every sun-drenched, dusty room, the air thick with the scent of pine boxes and inherited time. My parents, pragmatic souls who believed in hardwood floors and good school districts over superstition, were thrilled with the price, a steal for so much square footage, though my little sister, Chloe, who was 7 and possessed that eerie, pre-verbal sensitivity to atmospheres, immediately said the house smelled like wet birthday candles and old pennies. The realtor, a man named Henderson with overly shiny shoes and a smile that stretched his lips but left his eyes dead and glassy like a doll's, breezed through the tour with a rehearsed cadence, glossing over the water stains on the ceiling of the third-floor hallway like they were mere character notes, and the way certain doors refused to stay completely shut, swinging open a silent inch no matter how firmly you latched them. It was at the end of that hall, tucked behind a bend that the architect must have designed in a moment of spite, a kink in the floor plan that made the space feel unnaturally compressed and wrong, that we found the door. It wasn't like the others, thick, solid oak, blackened with age, with a heavy, tarnished brass lock that looked more at home on a vault or a prison cell than a bedroom. It was locked shut, not just with that central lock but with 3 additional newer deadbolts installed at the top, middle, and bottom, all shining with recent use against the old wood. When my dad, ever the joker, rapped his knuckles on it and asked Henderson for the key, the man's jovial facade slipped for just a second, a flash of something cold and serious, a primal warning in his gaze before he plastered the smile back on. That old thing? Just a storage closet, probably full of the previous owner's junk. The locks are rusted shut. We consider it a permanent fixture. The estate actually sold the house with a stipulation to leave it be. Better to just admire the craftsmanship. Honestly, save yourself the hassle. He'd clapped my dad on the shoulder then, a touch too hard, steering us all back towards the stairs, his laughter a little too loud and sharp in the empty hall, a sound that chased us down the steps. That should have been the first and final warning, carved in stone and underlined in blood, but in the chaotic, hopeful ballet of unpacking, the strange door became a background oddity, a gothic curiosity we'd occasionally glance at while hauling boxes to our new rooms, its presence a subtle thumbprint of dread on our fresh start. The first week was deceptively normal, filled with the sounds of cardboard tearing and furniture scraping, the house slowly transforming from an echo chamber into a home, though we all subconsciously avoided assigning anyone the bedroom directly across from the bend. But then the noises started, not the groans and moans of old plumbing you'd expect, but soft, insidious, rhythmic sounds that seemed to tailor themselves to the listener. For me, it was a faint, steady scratching coming from behind that door just after midnight, like someone methodically dragging a fingernail, or perhaps something sharper, across the wood grain from the other side, a sound that would sync with my heartbeat until I felt it in my molars. For my mother, it was the faint, discordant tinkling of a music box she couldn't place. Sometimes it would be a low, wet whisper, just below the threshold of comprehension, seeping through the keyhole not as sound but as a vibration in the air, a sensation of words being formed directly against your eardrum, a sound that made the hair on your arm stand up not from its volume, but from its intimate, creeping proximity, as if the speaker's lips were an inch from your skin. Chloe refused to go up to the 3rd floor alone, her small face pale and serious, claiming the hallway got colder the closer you got to the bend, a dry, bone cold that smelled of static and forgotten spaces, and that she could hear someone crying softly behind the door when she had to pass it to use the bathroom, a sound she described as not sad but hungry. My parents, rational to a fault, built a fortress of explanations. Squirrels in the walls, wind in the chimney, an overactive imagination fueled by the new, creaky environment and the stories kids tell at school. Dad even joked about it being our ghost room, a nickname that stuck with an uneasy, metallic taste of irony. I tried to adopt their skepticism, forcing myself to walk past the door during the day, but I started having dreams, vivid, suffocating dreams where I was locked in a pitch-black, padded space, and I could hear my family laughing and living on the other side of a thin wall, but no matter how I screamed and pounded, my voice was gone, swallowed by the padding, and the only thing that would answer was that same, wet whisper, now clear as day, saying my name, Ethan, with a grotesque familiarity, followed by a question, "Do you want to see what's in the walls?" I'd wake up gasping, the taste of dust and decay coating my tongue. I began avoiding the 3rd floor altogether, taking the longer route through the living room to get to my 2nd floor bedroom, feeling a ridiculous but palpable wave of relief once I was safely downstairs, as if I'd crossed some unseen border out of a hostile country. The tension, a wire pulled taut over weeks, finally snapped on a rain-lashed Tuesday night 2 months in. A storm of biblical fury had knocked out the power, plunging the house into a depthless, swallowing black broken only by the frantic dance of our flashlight beams, which seemed to make the shadows deeper rather than dispel them. We huddled in the living room, the wind screaming around the eaves like a chorus of the damned, when Chloe, her small voice trembling on the edge of panic, said she'd forgotten Mr. Snuggles, her beloved, threadbare stuffed rabbit, upstairs in her room on the 3rd floor. My mom sighed, aiming her flashlight towards the dark maw of the staircase, its beam revealing swirling dust motes like agitated spirits. "I'll go," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them, more to prove to myself that I was still the brave older brother, that the fear hadn't completely conquered me, than out of any real courage. The climb to the 3rd floor felt like ascending into a different, heavier atmosphere. The storm sounds were muffled here, replaced by the oppressive, waiting silence of the old house and the deafening tribal hammer of my own heart. My flashlight beam cut a shaky, narrow path down the hall, the shadows it cast leaping and twisting like living things eager to escape its glare. As I passed the bend, the temperature plummeted, a wave of frigid air that made my skin prickle, my breath puffing out in a sudden, ghostly cloud. And then I saw it, a sight that froze the blood in my veins. A thin, sinuous line of faint, phosphorescent green light, the color of spoiled meat and deep-sea things, seeping out from under the locked door. It pulsed weakly, rhythmically, in time with a new sound, not a scratch but a slow, dragging thump, drag, thump, like something heavy and limp being pulled across a floor. A smell hit me then, cutting through the dust and ozone air of the storm. The cloying, sweet decay of forgotten flowers left to rot in a vase, underpinned by a sharper, coppery tang. In that moment, all rational thought fled, incinerated by a primal terror. But beneath the terror, a strange, defiant anger ignited. It wasn't curiosity that drove me, it was a desperate, clawing need to end this, to shatter the haunting mystery with the blunt, ugly force of reality, to show the house that I wasn't just a scared child. I turned and ran downstairs, not for Chloe's toy, but to my dad's toolbox in the garage, my feet slipping on the stairs. I returned with a crowbar, its cold, solid weight a tangible anchor in the surreal horror. I didn't think about consequences, about realtor stipulations or my parents' rules. I thought only about silence, about sleep, about erasing the look of perpetual fear from my sister's eyes. With a grunt that was part effort, part scream, I jammed the curved end into the gap between the door and the jamb, right beside the oldest lock. The wood protested with a shriek that tore through the silent hall, a sound of pain that seemed too organic. With a final, grinding crunch of splintering wood and snapping metal, the locks gave way. The door swung inward silently, on hinges that were perfectly, impossibly oiled, revealing a void that smelled of age and secrets. My flashlight beam stabbed into the darkness, a lone sentinel in the black. It revealed not a storage closet, but a perfectly preserved bedroom, a diorama of arrested time. It was frozen in a past era, maybe the 1920s, frilly yellowed lace curtains, a four-poster bed with a dusty canopy, a porcelain doll with cracked cheeks propped on a rocking chair, its glass eyes catching the light and gleaming with malevolent life. The air was stale and thick with that sweet rot smell, now mixed with old perfume and mildew. And there, in the center of the faded floral rug, was a single fresh footprint, dark and damp, as if someone had just stepped in from the rain, a small footprint, child-sized. The pulsing green light was gone. The room was just a room, a forgotten museum exhibit. A wave of dizzying, hysterical relief washed over me, followed by a laugh that bubbled up raw and broken from my throat. It was just a room. We'd been spooked by a silly, locked-up time capsule. The terror of weeks dissolved into the simple, embarrassing fear of the dark. I turned to leave, to go tell my family the anticlimactic, liberating truth, when my light grazed the far wall. It was covered, floor to ceiling, not with wallpaper but with writing. Not graffiti, not random scrawls, but lines and lines of tiny, meticulous script, carved into the plaster and wallpaper with what must have been a fingernail or a shard of something, over and over, layer upon layer, a palimpsest of madness. I moved closer, my breath hitching, the beam trembling in my hand. The writing wasn't in English or any language I knew. It was a jumble of geometric symbols, repeating patterns that hurt to look at, spirals that seemed to move in the shaky light, and disturbing, childlike sketches of the house itself from odd angles, as if viewed from within the walls. But at eye level, in larger, more desperate gouges, were phrases I could understand carved deep. He watches through the walls, and the key is in the listening, and it is not a room, it is a mouth, and most chillingly, I was happy when the child came to play. I was less lonely. My blood turned to slush in my veins. This wasn't a ghost story. This was a crime scene, a confession, a prison log. As I stood there, paralyzed, a new detail emerged from the chaos of script. Among the carvings were dates. Recent dates. The previous month. Last week. Yesterday. And then, at the very bottom, freshly etched into the bare plaster beneath a strip of torn wallpaper, the raw wound in the wall barely dusty, was today's date, and a single horrifying sentence written in what looked like charcoal or soot. "Thank you for letting me out, Ethan. I have missed the sound of children." At that exact moment, as the meaning of those words detonated in my brain, downstairs my sister screamed. It wasn't a cry of fright at the storm, it was a shriek of pure, unadulterated terror, the sound of a soul being glimpsed, followed by the explosive cacophony of shattering glass and my parents' frantic, overlapping shouts. I dropped the crowbar, the clatter obscenely loud, and ran, my legs feeling like water, the journey down the 2 flights of stairs an endless, nightmarish treadmill. I burst into the living room to find a scene of surreal chaos. The large front window was broken inward, shards glittering like ice on the rug, rain and wind whipping the curtains into frenzied ghosts. My mom was on her knees, sobbing hysterically, clutching a catatonic Chloe, who was staring blankly at the opposite wall, her small body shivering violently, a line of drool tracing from her slack mouth. My dad was shouting into a dead phone, "We need an ambulance now. My daughter, she's in shock." "What happened?" I yelled over the howling gale. My father turned to me, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen in him before. "She said a man was looking in at her through the window. A man with no eyes, just dark, hollow holes. He was smiling, a wide, terrible smile. When I turned my flashlight on him, he was just gone." But Chloe, in a tiny, flat, monotone voice that wasn't her own, a voice stripped of all childhood cadence, corrected him. "Not gone. He's inside now. He says he's been lonely. He says he likes our house. He says he's been watching me sleep for a long time." She then turned her head slowly, with an eerie mechanical precision, and looked directly at me, her eyes focusing through the shock with a knowing, ancient emptiness. "He says thank you for opening his door, brother. He's been waiting for a key that wasn't afraid." The police found nothing, of course. A prowler, they concluded, probably a random tweaker or vagrant seeking shelter from the storm, their indifference a shield against the inexplicable. The broken lock on the 3rd floor door? Teenage vandalism, likely from before we moved in, they said, not even bothering to dust for prints. They didn't see the writing on the wall. By the time they looked, in the bland, revealing light of day, the walls were bare, stripped of their old paper by what they assumed was normal decay and moisture. The frantic carvings vanished as if they had never been, leaving only smooth, if stained, plaster. We moved out within the week, abandoning the house and most of our belongings, fleeing in a silent, shameful convoy of rented trucks and suppressed hysteria. We never spoke of it again as a family, a silent, trembling pact to bury the horror deep, to pretend the wound didn't exist. But Chloe hasn't been the same. The vibrant, imaginative girl is gone, replaced by a silent, watchful ghost who sleeps with every light in her room blazing and a chair wedged under the doorknob. She often draws, for hours on end, pictures of our old house, but in every drawing there's an extra window, a black square high up on the wall where no window ever existed, and inside it she always draws a single watching figure. And in the corner of each page she now meticulously writes, in perfect block letters, today's date. I thought we'd escaped. I thought the horror was a location, a place we could leave behind on Willow Lane. But last night, as I was falling asleep in my new apartment, miles and towns away, in a building that smells only of fresh paint and takeout, I heard it. Faint at first, a barely there rhythm in the hum of the refrigerator. Then unmistakable, seeping from the darkness of my walk-in closet. The soft, rhythmic scratching on the inside of the closet door. And this morning, sleep-deprived and nerves frayed to ribbons, when I went to make coffee, I found a single damp, child-sized footprint on the clean linoleum of my kitchen floor, leading from the hallway to the fridge and back, vanishing at the wall. He didn't want the house. Bricks and mortar were his prison. He wanted a family, a warm, living circuit to feed on, to watch, to twist. And I, with my crowbar and my desperate, arrogant need to conquer fear, to be the hero, became the unwitting ferryman, rowing him across the threshold from his forgotten limbo into our lives. The worst part, the thought that haunts me in the endless, silent hours before dawn, is the moral calculus I now cannot avoid. I opened that door to silence my sister's fears, to reclaim my own courage, and in doing so, I sacrificed her peace, her very self, forever. Some doors are locked not to keep us out, but to keep something else in, and the true, enduring horror isn't in the supernatural violation, but in the gut-deep, irreversible knowledge that you are the architect of your own nightmare, the one who turned the key in the lock for the monster. And the monster you unleashed, this watcher from the walls, now prefers the warmth of your loved one's breath, the sound of their dreams, to the cold silence of his forgotten room. He is with us, a permanent, shifting silhouette in the periphery of our lives, a cold spot in a sunny room, a whisper in the white noise. He has traded his ghost room for a larger prison of his own making, with my family as his reluctant cellmates. And I know, with a certainty that chills my soul to its core, that he is waiting with infinite patience for us to feel safe again, to let our guard down, to believe it's finally over. Because only then, when the last chair is removed from the last door, will his final whispered game truly begin. And the rules, I fear, were written on those walls, in a language we are only just beginning to understand.